Hey folks, I know I'm just an old guy telling stories, but before we dive in, do me a solid, leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and let's enjoy today's stories together. Now, before we get started, I've got a quick disclaimer. The content presented in this video is purely for entertainment purposes only. Theories and stories discussed here are speculative and not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. So, sit back, relax, and let's get into it with the horrible Latka. My buddy Steve was a genius at making money without doing anything. At one point, he was enrolled in 12 different clinical trials at the same time. Some of these were for drugs that would have had bad interactions, but it didn't matter to Steve because he never actually took the drugs. He did it like they do in the movies and just slipped them under his tongue and then spat them into his hand when the doc was turned away. Other trials were for new therapeutic approaches and things like that, but those were no problem for Steve either. At most, he had to lie, literally and metaphorically, on somebody's couch for an hour each week, then collect his check on the way out. But eventually they caught on and Steve was put on some kind of list. There was a nationwide ban on Steve so that he couldn't participate in any more trials sponsored by universities or private drug companies, which essentially precluded him from that easy money. But Steve found a workaround. Not all experiments are above board and sanctioned by the FDA or whatever. There is, in fact, a hidden world of people testing things out in their garages, streamlining the whole process, without having to worry about pesky and expensive regulations. One of Steve's friends gave him a link to a forum on the dark web, and after that, he was in the pipeline. The thing about these experiments is that if it were for, say, a new drug, they didn't trust you to just swallow the pill. You had to open your mouth and lift your tongue. You had to actually take the thing because these people weren't fucking around. But boy did they pay. One morning, I was awakened by an insanely loud banging at my apartment door. "Who's that?" moaned my girlfriend, Sophia. I looked at the clock with bleary eyes. It was 5:55 a.m. "Open up, dude," shouted Steve from the hallway. "Oh, fuck him," said Sophia. "He could be in trouble," I said, shooting out of bed, full of adrenaline. I answered the door in my boxers, and there was Steve, bouncing up and down, his pupils each the size of the full moon. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm awesome," said Steve. "Holy shit, dude, this stuff, they gave me $1,000 to take one fucking pill and it rules so much. Feels so good. Oh my god, Jay. Oh my god." My head hurt as I tried to piece together a thought. "So you're high, and you came to tell me that you got paid a lot of money to get high?" I felt a surge of rage welling up deep inside of me. Yes. No. Look, man, you're my best friend. I love you. I love you so much. Listen, I came here because look, there's money. A lot of money. For me and for you. $20,000. For a video game. To play a video game or something, dude. 20 grand. To play a video game for a few hours. Look, I'm just telling you this because I love you. You don't need to take drugs or anything. Just do some virtual reality stuff for a few hours and boom, 20 grand in your pocket, like that. The flood of rage died down as I tried to make sense of what Steve was saying. I couldn't. "What are you saying?" I asked. "Why are you here before the crack of dawn?" "Sophia's pissed and so am I, really?" No, said Steve with a horrified look on his face. "No, I want you to be happy. Sophia too. Listen. You still have that Tor browser I set you up with and all that?" "I guess so. Good. Listen. Look." Steve jammed his hand in his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. "Look, just type this in and you'll see. You'll see. Easy money, okay. $20,000. You can finally buy that engagement ring you've been." I reached out and smacked Steve across the side of the head. "Jesus Christ, dude, keep it down, yeah?" Steve looked shocked and hurt for a moment before the realization dawned on him. "Oh, shit. My bad. I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry. I wish I could delete it. Listen, are you going to check this out or what?" He held out the crumpled piece of paper to me. I took it and shrugged. "I'll check it out, Steve, but that's it for now. Why don't you head home and sleep this one off, huh?" "Yes," said Steve, nodding his head like crazy. "Yes, check it out. I'll sleep it off." I started to close the door, but he stuck his foot in just before it closed. Dude? "Yeah. Can I use your bathroom?" I opened the door and sighed as he rushed into the bathroom and started puking his guts out. Steve received a ban from our apartment after that, but we stayed in touch. He would text me every few hours, asking if I'd checked out the advertisement for the video game trial yet. The truth was that I had checked it out as soon as he left that morning, but I was undecided. On the one hand, the $20,000 sure was intriguing. That was almost half again as much as I made in a year, more than half after taxes. And I had a feeling that this wasn't the sort of gig where they took taxes out. I'd be able to do a lot with the money. Take Sophia out for all kinds of dinners, maybe take a vacation and travel somewhere interesting. The kinds of things we always wanted to do but never could afford to do. Then too, yes, there was that engagement ring. Sophia would say yes either way, even if I presented her with some rolled up aluminum foil, but I wanted it to be special. I wanted it to be special, but I couldn't afford to make it special. On the other hand, well, the whole thing was sketchy as fuck. Who pays some Joe off the street $20,000 to test out a video game? And why go through such shady channels to set the thing up? I knew from the start that nothing good could come from it. I knew that, but I did it anyway. Alright, I wrote in a text to Steve. I'm in for the video game thing, my man. We're gonna be swimming in fucking caviar, my dude. Steve and I drove to the address together. It was, strangely, a respectable looking office building. We went up to the entrance and looked at the map of the building. There was a lawyer in there, a counselor, an accountant, and so forth. Shit, said Steve. Which fucking office is it? On cue his phone buzzed. Oh, he said, the basement. I asked, not for real? The basement? I don't know about this, man. Come on, dude. $20,000. And in such a nice building too. I'm used to going to crazy people's garages and swallowing God knows what. This is going to be cake. I nodded, but as we walked to the elevator, my sense of unease grew larger and larger until it was screaming at me. Turn around. Whatever this is, it's bad. It's just a video game, I muttered. What's that? Asked Steve. I snapped out of it. I said, let's go play this dumb video game and get paid. That's the attitude, said Steve, grinning as the elevator door slid closed behind me. We rode down to the basement as I tried to calm myself down. It's a video game. In the basement of a respectable office. Probably they could only afford to rent the basement. I shut myself up before I could ask. They could only afford to rent the basement, but they're paying you $20,000 each? When we reached the bottom, the doors slid open and the first thing that I saw was a man and a woman sitting at a plastic work table in the middle of a large room. Other than that, it looked like a standard basement with equipment like boilers and hot water heaters and exposed wiring and concrete floors. Welcome, said the woman. Stephen and Jason, is that right? That's us, said Steve, stepping off the elevator. I followed behind and watched as the woman wrote something on her clipboard. That's fantastic, said the man. Right on time, well, a few minutes late, but that's okay. He laughed. It happens, said the woman, smiling. People have things to do. And we respect that here. That's why we're going to get right down to business. Or, nearly so. First, we need you to sign the contract. The woman held out 2 clipboards and we each took one. Before I looked at it, I took a moment to note that my unease had not subsided, despite the surface friendliness of the man and the woman. Somehow, that made it more bizarre, that they were just sitting there, so poised amongst the plumbing pipes running overhead, ready to offer us a lot of money to play a video game. Where do we play the game? I asked, looking around. I didn't see a TV or anything. Up here, said the man, tapping his head. I started, but Steve gave me a nudge. They'll tell us what to do, he said. Just sign the contract, dude. He scrawled some information into a few boxes and dashed off a signature while I read more closely. The participant agrees not to seek compensation beyond the predetermined amount. In this case, the predetermined amount is $20,000 for participating in one trial game of Total Control, TC. The makers of TC and the administrators of the trial hereby relieve themselves of all liability for any injuries sustained during gameplay with the express agreement of the participant. Injuries? I asked. What kind of game is this? The woman smiled. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to tell you anything about the game until you sign the contract. After that, you'll know all about it. In the event that the participant is unable to collect the predetermined amount at the end of the game, the makers of TC will transfer the funds to a person of the participant's choosing. The following box is for the participant to note the name and address of the next of kin. So you're saying that if we die, you'll give the money to somebody that we choose? I asked. Is that right? That's right, said the man. If we die while playing your game, I stressed. I turned to Steve. This is nuts. Steve shrugged. It's a lot of money, dude. Take it or leave it. I'm taking it. I tried to convince myself to leave it, but then I thought about going to Europe with Sophia. I wrote her name in the next of kin box and then signed the form. I handed the clipboard back to the woman, who scanned it over. Fantastic, she said. Now will you tell us what this game is? I asked. We'll do better than that, said the man. He reached down into a cardboard box on the ground and pulled out what looked to be 2 headsets. We'll show you the game. Please, gentlemen, put these devices on your heads and prepare for an experience unlike any other. Or so we hope, he added, laughing. Steve didn't hesitate to put the thing on his head. It looked like the front half of a helmet with an elastic band securing it in place, and a pair of glasses attached to the helmet. I don't see anything, said Steve. It's a 2-player game, said the man, nodding to me. I took a deep breath. It's just a fucking game. I put the headset on and looked through the glasses. Everything looked the same except it had a slight yellow tint. I watched as the man reached into the box again and brought out 2 video game controllers. He handed one to the woman, and then they each pushed a button. I heard Steve scream a split second before I heard the hiss of some hydraulic mechanism being engaged just above my ear. Then I felt the most intense pain in my life. It felt like something was being jabbed directly into my fucking brain, and that's exactly what was happening. A trickle of blood rolled down the side of my head as my brain lit up with pain. Then I was out of it. When I woke up, I was strapped to a chair, sitting opposite the man and woman behind their table and next to Steve. There was only a dull ache in my head now, but it didn't take long for me to burst into a full-on panic. Ah, good, said the woman. You're both awake. She stood up calmly, walked over, and undid my straps. What is this? I gasped. What the fuck is this? It's an experiment, said the man. Don't worry, we've ironed out some kinks since the last time we tried it. What experiment? I asked, standing up on wobbly legs. What are you going to do to us? The woman went to work unstrapping Steve. We've implanted a device in your head, she explained. It allows us to control your physical movements. Or so we hope. Steve rubbed his head. What the fuck? You're going to pay us, right? Of course, said the man. He reached into his cardboard box and pulled out 2 thick envelopes. I hope cash is okay. He tossed them across the table to our feet. Steve bent down and tore his open. I saw the cash inside. Okay, he said. That's worth it for a little headache, I guess. All right. So you've implanted these devices in our brains. Okay. So can we leave now? You can try, said the man. But you won't be able to if we don't want you to, said the woman. And we don't want you to, said the man. Not until you fight to the death, said the woman. I jumped to my feet and tried to slow down my breathing. Come on, man, I said to Steve. That's enough of this. I bent down to pick up my envelope and then started walking towards the elevator. Thanks for the money, guys, said Steve. Then he followed behind me and pushed the button. The light came on and we waited for the elevator to come. Then I reached my fist back and swung it as hard as I could at Steve's jaw. It connected with a loud crack and I saw a spray of blood leave his mouth. Wah fuck, groaned Steve, rubbing his jaw. I felt dizzy. What the fuck indeed? Why had I just socked my best friend in the face for no reason? Dude, I'm so sorry. I have no idea why I did that. Steve spit out some blood on the basement floor. Forget it. Let's just get the fuck out of here. The elevator door dinged. Sounds good to me, I said as the door slid open. I went to step in when suddenly I felt a hand grab my shoulder and roughly spin me around. It was Steve. He had a confused look on his face as he grabbed my neck with both hands and started to choke me. My nerves exploded in panic as I struggled to breathe. I felt myself bring my knee up into Steve's balls. He let go of my neck then and hunched over. What's happening? He gasped. I brought my elbow down on his back and he screamed out in pain. I don't know, I said. I don't know. I looked over at the man and the women still seated behind their plastic work table. They were each holding their game controllers and smiling. What the fuck is happening? The woman pushed a button and suddenly Steve lunged at me, driving his shoulder into my gut. We hit the ground together, my elbow taking the brunt of the impact. I'm so sorry, cried Steve. I can't stop it. I reached up and grabbed Steve's face in my hand. I didn't want to. I tried to make myself stop, but I couldn't. I began squeezing between my thumb and middle finger, which were spread out and gripped into the spot behind his eye sockets. Stop this, I shouted. Steve sunk into my palm with his teeth and tore a chunk of my flesh off. I felt a searing pain and a deep fear as he spit my skin onto the ground. I tried to will myself to stay still, but I couldn't. I punched him in the eye. When his head jerked back from the blow, I pushed against his chest and twisted around so that now I was on top of him. I took a clump of his hair in my hand and began smashing his head against the concrete floor, again and again and again. I was crying. I was begging myself to stop. I was begging the man and the woman to stop whatever they were doing. I was begging Steve to forgive me, as his head hit the floor with a thunk that sounded wetter and wetter each time, as blood gushed and sprayed everywhere. "Okay," said the man after a while. "That's enough. My player is dead now." I heard the woman laugh. "I told you I would win." Suddenly, I was in control of my own movements again. I set Steve's head gently on the ground and knelt next to him, sobbing. "What have I done?" I wailed. "What did you make me do?" Now," said the man, standing up. "It's not all bad news." He walked over and picked up the envelope of cash that Steve had dropped. "He did name you as his next of kin. So you've just made $40,000? I looked up at him with blurry eyes. "You fucking monsters," I said, standing up. "I'll fucking kill you." I ran at him full of rage with my arms outstretched. But when I got to him, I slowed down, spread my arms wider, and embraced him in a friendly hug. My mind screamed in terror and rage, but my body wouldn't respond. "We control you now," said the woman. "We're happy to let it go at this. You've served our purpose as a beta tester. We'll let you get in that elevator with your money, and you'll never hear from us again. If you honor your contract." "Do you remember your contract?" "There's a copy of it in your back pocket. There's one bit that you should pay careful attention to. The bit about how you are never to tell anyone anything close to what happened here. Don't worry about coming up with an explanation for your friend. We'll take care of that. All that you have to do about this all is literally nothing. Don't say a word. You're probably best forgetting it ever happened. There's a hose in the corner," said the man. "Clean yourself up, take your money, and leave." I did that. I just wasn't sure if I was the one doing it. After I killed Steve, my life fell apart. Of course it did. I knew that I wasn't in control of my actions at the time, but that didn't help at all. I'd watched the life leave his eyes, and I'd gone on smashing his head against the concrete again and again, well after he was dead. I had nightmares about it every night. And the worst part was that I couldn't tell anybody about it. What was I supposed to do? Turn myself in to the police? For murdering my best friend literally against my will? How would that help anything? I wanted to tell Sophia. I wanted to tell her so badly, but I couldn't. Those people had put the fear in me. We started doing fancy things together with the money, like going out to eat, but it was no good. It was like a part of me had died when Steve had died, when I had bashed the life out of him. Sophia didn't want fancy dinners and all of the things that money can buy. She wanted me, but I wasn't there anymore. I started drinking more and more. I considered suicide. Not seriously at first, but as time went by, it seemed more and more like a viable option. Anything to stop the never-ending guilt and grief. For her part, Sophia stuck with me for longer than could have been hoped for. But finally it got to be too much. It was clear enough that things were over well before the night we lay in bed together after yet another failed attempt at making love. "I can't do this anymore, Jay," she said. "I love you, but something changed after Steve's accident. I know that he was your best friend and it tore your heart out, but what about life? What about me? You didn't die. I didn't die. We're still here. I can't do it anymore. It's been 3 months and I don't think I've heard you laugh once. I'm not blaming you, and I can't tell you how much I wanted to be able to do this. It's my failure, really. But like I said, we're still alive and I want to live while I can. And I want you to live too." I clenched my jaw, trying to fight back the tears. I tried to think rationally. If you really love her, you'll tell her to fuck off. But I didn't. "I have to tell you something," I said. Then, as my soul screamed in horror, I smothered her with a pillow. "I've been in bed with Sophia's corpse for 2 days now. Yesterday, I got a text: we have gathered all the data we need. Your contract has been fulfilled. Your unit has been deactivated. We thank you for your participation and wish you the best of luck." I don't know what to do. I'll start here by typing this out. My name is Jay and I killed my best friend and the love of my life, but I wasn't in control of my body at the time. Where do I go from here? It was a chilly evening a few weeks ago when my friend Jason and I found ourselves indulging in the dark corners of the internet for our particular amusement. We would quite often peruse the dark web, trying to find the strangest things we could in that lawless place. We'd been doing it for years, since we first got access to the dark web back in high school when Jason found out about the Tor. We'd seen everything from drug sites to snuff sites, but on this particular evening, a peculiar link caught our attention. It was titled Doolittle's Bazaar. Intrigued, we clicked the link. A digital menagerie showcasing exotic animals of all kinds opened up in front of us. It was obviously run by poachers and boasted a large amount of endangered and rare species. Mesmerized by the bizarre collection, we scrolled through the listings, intrigued by the curiosities on display. It had everything from mundane tropical fish to incredibly rare big cats. We were amazed. Amidst the virtual oddities, a seemingly innocuous pop-up materialized, advertising a dog, claiming that it was unlike any other. This dog is made just for you. It's astonishingly intelligent, capable of comprehending and executing any command, the perfect companion, it read. Its price tag was unusually low for what was being offered, almost too good to be true. Being the animal lover out of the two of us, Jason decided to take the plunge, succumbing to the allure of owning a unique and brilliant canine companion, as well as the possibility of rescuing the creature from the hands of the poachers. They're probably mistreating the poor thing anyway. You know what poachers can be like. I've seen videos online. Besides, no one else in the world will have one like it, he said, as though trying to justify his purchase. I warned him that it was probably a scam, but he was determined, as though he'd already made up his mind but was now coming up with the justification. He always got like this whenever it came to animals, always leading with his heart. I know it's risky, I'm not stupid. But what if it's legitimate? What if that poor creature is suffering and I can do something about it now? He said. With a nonchalant click of a button, he entered his payment details and placed the order. A sense of apprehension filled me as he clicked the button and the screen flashed, payment processed. I wasn't sure why at the time. I think it was just a general distrust of the dark web. After all, we'd seen a lot of things on there before. Well, said Jason, let's see what happens. Worst case, I've just lost some money. Best case, I've rescued an animal. We carried on searching through random links in the dark web, but at the back of our minds was the excitement to see Jason's new dog, as well as the anxiety as to whether it was even real at all. You could never be too careful on the dark web. Jason went home later that night, and the events of the evening gradually faded from our minds. Several weeks passed by with no sign of the dog. There was nothing from the company on the deep web either. We both assumed that it had been a scam and that Jason had just lost his money. I told you so, I goaded each time I saw him. A few days after that, an obscure package arrived at my friend's doorstep. It was a huge box, larger than anything he'd ever ordered before. You could easily fit a full-length sofa inside and still have room to spare. Strapped to the top was a note. Printed on plain paper with no discerning marks, it read, "Your very own unique companion is here. We hope you enjoy it." Below, in the red text, were the words, "No refunds, no returns." Wasting no time, Jason called me. "It's here, the dog from the deep web, it's arrived." The box is massive, but I can hear it moving around inside, he practically shouted down the phone in excitement. Point one to Jason for always being right. What, really? Haha, okay, you win this one, Mr. Awesome, I responded, amazed that something actually had turned up. "I'll swing by after work and meet the new furball." "Sweet, see you then," he said in that same excited tone. Then he hung up. I couldn't help a feeling of excitement welling up in my stomach. I wasn't exactly an animal lover myself, I could take or leave them, but I was still excited to see this new dog. As soon as I finished work, I made my way over to his house as quickly as I could, interested to see what made the dog so unique. Knocking on the door, Jason slowly opened it, his head poking out gingerly from behind it. "So where is it?" I asked, trying to glance over his shoulder. "Come on, I want to see it." "Yeah, okay, come in," Jason said, his voice quivering slightly, a stark contrast to his confident tone over the phone mere hours ago. I made my way into the house, but there was no sign of the creature that had been delivered. It's in the basement," Jason said, again in that shaking voice. Now very confused by what was going on, I followed as he led me to the basement. As soon as he opened the door, I was met with an odd stench, not something I'd ever smelt before. It was a sickly sweet smell with a hint of iron. I couldn't help a feeling of apprehension in my gut as I stared down the staircase into the black abyss. Inside the basement it was dark. There was a small old light in the middle of the basement illuminating a small area and casting long shadows across the floor. As I made my way down, the smell was much stronger, nearly suffocating me. I could make out sounds too. There's no way I could describe those sounds. They seemed like a low grunting noise, but there was a high-pitched, pained quality to it. There's no way that sound was made by a dog. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I could see a large metal cage in the far corner of the basement. It had thick iron bars and a heavy-looking padlock on the gate. The floor was covered in sawdust. The sound seemed to be emanating from further within. "Come here, girl," Jason beckoned, again a quiver in his voice. My eyes remained fixed on the cage, awaiting the reveal of his peculiar new companion. The creature inside it obeyed his command, moving into the dim light. I had to stifle a scream. There's no way that thing could be a dog. It was hairless, with large red-looking welts all over its body that were held together with stitches. If I had to describe it, I would say that it appeared as if someone had crudely amalgamated human components to create a macabre imitation of a canine form. It was breathing that same low grunt with a high-pitched whine, as though its every breath was pained. Its face looked stretched, like the skin was pulled back, almost into a grimace of constant agony. I almost feel sorry for the wretched thing if it wasn't so repulsive. "Oh, God," I said, not sure of what else to say. All words left me. "I know it's horrible, isn't it? I didn't think this is what they'd send. I was expecting something like a really obedient Doberman or something, but not this thing," Jason said. I could hear the sadness and disappointment in his voice. He almost couldn't bear to look at it either. "It looks like it's been so badly mistreated. The poor thing. Can you return it?" I asked, still looking at the thing in the cage, that same sense of revulsion filling me. "No, there are no returns. I'm stuck with her," Jason said in a frustrated tone. "Why don't you just give her to a rescue center or release her into the wild or something then?" I asked. "I can't do that," Jason snapped, almost offended. "Look at her. Nobody'd take her for one, and she doesn't look like she'd survive in the wild on her own. She needs help." I felt so sorry for Jason. He seemed genuinely upset by the creature in the cage that he was now stuck with. He was a compassionate person, and I could see that this dilemma about what to do and the need to help was eating away at him inside. "All right," I said, "if you're going to keep this thing, we can't just call it that horrible thing. What are you going to call it? Got any ideas? Demon Doggo? Scooby Don't?" He thought for a second before saying Lucy. Lucy had been his grandmother's name. She passed away when he was really young. "Yeah, I think I want to call her Lucy." In the days following Lucy's arrival, Jason retreated further into his house, isolating himself from friends and social interactions. Whenever we managed to catch a glimpse of him, an uncharacteristic skittishness or edge hung about him, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor. He'd still speak and behave like the Jason we all knew, but he seemed distracted, as though he was constantly preoccupied with something. He also started dressing differently, wearing long clothing that covered most of his body regardless of the outside temperature, whereas before he was a shorts and t-shirt kind of guy. Every time I would ask him about Lucy, he would respond with something like, "She's good, yek," or "She's getting there," but he wouldn't go into much detail. You could see it on his face, a look of conflict, as though he wanted to confide something in us but he couldn't bring himself to. In the weeks that followed, Jason had gotten worse. It was rare that anyone could get in contact with him at all. When we did see him, he was now a skinny, gaunt imitation of the healthy, happy Jason we knew before. He looked incredibly pale and sickly. He'd also developed an odd limp in his right leg. When we asked him about what was happening to him, he would laugh it off, saying that the doctors were investigating. But his expression didn't seem to portray the same feeling. He looked worried, almost scared. On the very rare occasions that he did come out with us, he'd normally only stay for a couple of hours before making some excuse to go back home. We were all worried about him. Unable to ignore the signs of his deteriorating condition, I mustered the courage to check on him. When I arrived at his house, I pressed the doorbell, waiting a while for an answer. When none came, I knocked on the door, assuming that the bell may not be plugged. As I knocked, the door opened slowly. It was unlocked. This was strange. Jason didn't normally leave his door unlocked. With a sense of unease now stirring in my stomach, I made my way into the house, shouting Jason's name in the hopes that he would hear me. His house exuded an eerie silence, and a deeper sense of foreboding enveloped me as I made my way further into the house. It was empty, there was no sign of anyone there at all. It hadn't been cleaned in what looked like ages either. The sink was overflowing with washing up and the bins were at the point of spilling over. I shouted for Jason again. Still no answer. I was beginning to get really worried about him now. Growing increasingly concerned, I combed through the house, my anxiety escalating. Amidst my search, a thick booklet perched atop a cabinet caught my eye. Its appearance suggested recent handling, urging me to inspect it. Picking it up, I turned it over and read the cover. It looked like a manual with a picture of a creature that looked like Lucy on the front. "So you own a Sanguisuga canis," was sprawled in a large font at the top. Perplexed, I flicked through its pages. Sanguisuga canis was the Latin for bloodhound. The creature my friend had purchased on the dark web was a very rare and old subspecies of canine that subsisted entirely on blood. They were so exceedingly rare because of their metabolism, they could only go 6 to 8 hours between feeds until their bodies began to digest themselves and they starved to death. Horror and dread washed over me as I realized the extent of my friend's situation. I continued searching the house with a more frantic urgency, shouting for Jason but still receiving no answer. Then from the corner of my eye, I noticed that the basement door was wide open. I could smell that same sickly smell of decay wafting up. It was stronger now and even more nauseating now that I knew it was due to decaying blood. I could also hear sounds from down there, the same low growl and whine as before, but there was another sound mixed in that I couldn't put my finger on. Tentatively, I ventured into the depths of his basement, terrified as to what I would find there. I couldn't bring myself to shout for Jason. It sounds silly, but the sounds in the basement sent shivers through me, so much so that I was too afraid to utter a sound. As I neared the bottom of the stairs, I poked my head around the corner into the dim gloom. I discovered Jason lying unconscious, in the middle of the basement under that light. He was pale. Deathly pale. I ran over to him, my fears being pushed to the back of my mind, overpowered by a deep concern for my friend. I rolled him over and tried to wake him, but he was completely unresponsive. I checked for a pulse, any sign of breathing or anything else that would show me that my friend was alive. There was nothing. I shook him again, begging him to wake up. The feeling of devastation was crushing. I was doing my best not to break down, but I could feel the hot tears welling up in my eyes. Jason, my best friend, was gone. I was so confused. What had happened? I knew that he was sick, but I had no idea he was this far gone. Why hasn't he said anything to me? I pulled him close and hugged him, beginning to cry, as though if I hugged him hard enough it might bring him back. He was cold as ice. He was really gone. Slowly I laid his body back down gently onto the basement floor. As I lowered him, I noticed a piece of paper had dropped from his clenched fist. I turned to pick it up, and as I grabbed it my eyes perceived something that I'm not sure I'll ever forget. Emerging from Jason's right leg, a grotesque and sinewy appendage, resembling a nightmarish vine, slithered into my line of sight. Its fleshy color clashed starkly against his pallid skin, with a labyrinth of capillaries that seemed to writhe and pulse with pulsating crimson fluid. The eerie, almost dance-like undulations propelled the liquid in a disturbing rhythm, leading the eye along the horrifying path into the abyss of Lucy's cage. As if called to action by observation, the tube disconnected from Jason's leg with an audible pop before slowly retracting back into the cage. Then there was a low growl as Lucy made her way forward. She was much larger than the last time I saw her, with red stains around her mouth where the tube was now receding. Her stomach was also distended and bloated, a deep red color compared with the rest of her pale frame. She looked me in the eyes with her cold gaze and let out another, threatening growl. I began to back away, noticing the heavy padlock of the cage door on the floor just beyond Jason. A jolt of fear shot through me. She was loose. Without a second thought, I ran. Fear clenched my heart as I scrambled up the stairs, propelled by sheer survival instinct. Reaching the top, I slammed the door shut and barricaded it with a chair. The door thudded seconds later, as though Lucy had thrown herself at it as hard as she could. The door rattled violently and the chair visibly shook, but it held. She made an awful noise, like a roar, but nothing like I'd heard before, but she couldn't get out. Desperation clouded my mind as I grappled with the dilemma before me. I couldn't let that abomination escape, not now that I knew what it was. But nor could I bear to confront the monstrosity that killed my best friend. I felt an overwhelming sense of entrapment and exhaustion, as if the weight of the entire ordeal was crashing down on me. With the main danger now sealed behind the door, the reality of the situation settled in, threatening to drown me in a tidal wave of emotions. The grief I'd felt in the basement when I saw Jason's body, my fear as I realized Lucy was loose, and now the dilemma of what to do with her. I made my way over to Jason's couch, needing to sit and try to process this, trying to figure out what I needed to do next. As I sat down, I remembered the piece of paper that had fallen from Jason's hand as I lowered him to the floor, the paper I was picking up just as I noticed that horrific proboscis. In the ensuing chaos, I'd stuffed it into my pocket, not wanting to lose the last remnant of my friend. Taking it out of my pocket, I smoothed it out. It was a note addressed to me. It would make sense he'd know that I'd be the one to come looking for him. I began to read the rest of the note. Jason had written the note in his final moments, trying to explain why he'd been so distant and strange lately, and apologizing for how he'd been acting towards me and my friends. He explained that he'd not had any other way to feed Lucy, so he had been using his own blood every 8 hours to feed the creature. He knew it was draining him, gradually killing him, but he didn't want her to die. She was a living thing and endangered. He'd said she deserves to live. But he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it up. He asked me to forgive him, going on to say that he'd valued our friendship above all else. I placed the note down, tears welling up in my eyes. I sat there for hours, finding myself grappling with the knowledge that the creature's thirst for blood had been what had taken my best friend from me, and if I didn't act it would soon lead to its demise. But my best friend sacrificed his life to keep that thing alive, and if I let it die then he'll have given his life for nothing. I've still not made a decision yet, but I can't hear anything from the basement anymore. I guess there's no harm giving her a bit of mine for the moment just to keep her alive while I decide. Yeah, just this once. Alright folks, that's it for today's stories. I hope you enjoyed the ride, even if it left you with a few chills down your spine. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the Horrible Latka for more creepy tales. Got any crazy stories of your own? Drop them in the comments and who knows, maybe I'll be sharing them next time. Until then, stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll catch you in the next one.